My name is Monica, and I've seen 61 years pass. Just last evening, my own son inflicted a beating upon me, leaving me bleeding into a bowl of unseasoned soup. As I lay on the kitchen floor, dabbing at my wounds with a worn out rag, he retired to his room, shut the door, and drifted off to sleep as though no incident had occurred. It was as if assaulting his own mother was the most ordinary occurrence imaginable. This morning I awoke with aching limbs, livid marks adorning my arms, and a laceration on my lip that still throbs with every word I utter. Yet the deepest agony is not physical, it is the profound shame. It is the stark realization that my own offspring, the one I nurtured with such profound affection, to whom I surrendered my all, perceives me merely as his domestic servant. It is the crushing weight of knowing my sole purpose in existence is to cater to his needs and maintain silence. I rose at 5 this morning, as is my daily ritual. Ethan was already seated at the kitchen table, impeccably clad in his charcoal suit, engrossed in his mobile device. He didn't even acknowledge my presence as I entered, merely stating, without looking up, "Breakfast, make haste, I have a crucial engagement." It was as if the previous night's tirade, where he branded me worthless and useless, threatening to cast me onto the streets had he not been bound by maternal ties, had never transpired. I meticulously prepared his preferred scrambled eggs, enriched with 3 measures of grated cheese, accompanied by 2 slices of perfectly toasted bread and a cup of unsweetened black coffee. Precision was paramount. Any deviation, however slight, would trigger an outburst. And when Ethan's temper flares, the repercussions invariably fall upon me. As he consumed his meal, the distinct sound of a key turning in the lock reverberated through the residence. It was Savannah, his wife, a youthful and sophisticated woman. She invariably greets me with a disingenuous smile and treats me with utter disregard, as if I were invisible. She entered adorned in a pale green dress and elevated heels, bestowed a kiss upon Ethan's cheek, and occupied her seat as if she were the proprietress of the establishment. "Good morning, Mrs. Davis," she chirped, her tone saccharine, a modulation reserved exclusively for Ethan's presence. "How are you this fine morning?" My heart ached to confess that her husband had left me bruised, that my entire back bore the marks of his aggression, that I could no longer endure this existence. Yet I forced a smile and replied, "I am well, thank you." "Will you be partaking in breakfast, Savannah?" I inquired. Ethan's gaze, sharp and warning, pierced mine. His eyes conveyed a clear message. One misplaced word, and tonight will be significantly worse. He then added, his lips curving into that familiar, insincere smile, employed solely when observed. "Look, Mother, I procured this new cosmetic for you. It's quite effective at concealing those minor abrasions you sustained during your stumble last night." Minor abrasions. That's how he characterized his assault. As if it were an unfortunate accident, as if I had simply tripped and collided with his fist of my own volition. I accepted the makeup without a word. It was a high-end foundation, the sort that commands a price exceeding $50. He likely funded this extravagance with my own pension funds, given his complete dominion over my financial affairs. He claims it's for my own welfare, asserting that at my advanced age I am no longer capable of managing funds independently. The unvarnished truth is that I have not seen a single cent of my retirement income for the past 2 years. Savannah gazed at him with eyes brimming with admiration. "You are so considerate, my dear, always looking after your mother. If only she truly comprehended. If only she were aware that her impeccable husband, the accomplished executive who orchestrates multi-million-dollar transactions at his firm, returns home each evening to vent his frustrations upon me." Following breakfast, Ethan adjusted his crimson tie, retrieved his briefcase, and murmured into my ear, his voice low as Savannah meticulously reapplied her makeup. Recall our conversation from last night? Should you ever divulge any information, should you confide in anyone about the events within these walls, you will deeply regret it. No one will lend credence to your account. You are merely an erratic elderly woman subsisting on your son's generosity. His pronouncement sent a shiver down my spine, chilling me to the core. They departed hand in hand, a picture of the idealized couple they affect to be. From the vantage point of the window, I observed them entering Ethan's new vehicle, a sable sedan whose cost exceeded $400,000. My assets, entirely liquidated to fund its acquisition. Once the house was steeped in silence, I retreated to the kitchen, succumbing to a torrent of tears. Not tears of sorrow, but of unbridled fury and abject helplessness. I understand the imperative to act, yet the path forward remains obscured. I cannot continue to exist in this manner, but I possess no strategy for escaping this living hell. For hours I remained seated in the hushed kitchen, observing the slow, deliberate crawl of sunlight across the tiled floor. This abode was once my sanctuary. I acquired it 30 years prior with the savings meticulously accumulated during my tenure as an executive secretary at the law firm of Sullivan and Associates. 40 years of my life devoted to that singular pursuit. Rising at 5 each morning, perpetually punctual, meticulously organizing the lives of others, I never fathomed that I would ultimately become a captive within my own dwelling. The unraveling commenced 3 years ago, subsequent to Ethan's dissolution of his initial marriage. He appeared at my doorstep one evening, a suitcase in tow, his countenance mirroring that of a lost child, a visage that invariably pierced my resolve. Mother, I require sanctuary here for a brief period, merely until I can rectify my financial predicament. He professed to be rendered destitute by the divorce, having lost his residence and possessing no place to reside. I, in my perpetual maternal naivety, opened my doors and my heart. Of course, my son, this is your home as well. Such profound folly. I was oblivious to the fact that I was inviting a malevolent entity to share my abode. The initial months proceeded without incident. Ethan would rise early, attend to his professional obligations, return in the evening, and we would share our evening repast. He even rendered assistance with the weekly grocery procurement. I harbored the conviction that we would finally cultivate the maternal filial bond I had perpetually yearned for. However, a subtle transformation began to manifest. Initially, it manifested as minor criticisms. Mother, this sustenance is excessively seasoned. Mother, why is your attention to the bathroom sanitation lacking? Mother, your attire is excessively creased. It is rather mortifying. These pronouncements inflicted pain, yet I rationalized them by attributing them to the stress he endured post-divorce. Subsequently, he began to exert control over my finances. Mother, at your age, it is imprudent to handle such substantial quantities of currency. It poses a considerable risk. Permit me to assist you with your fiscal management. And I, in my lamentable gullibility, granted him unfettered access to my bank accounts. It is merely to assist me, I reasoned. He is my son. He would never inflict harm. How profoundly mistaken I proved to be. Within a span of 6 months, Ethan had systematically appropriated my entire financial resources. My monthly pension of $1,200 was directly rerouted to his personal account. He allocated me a meager $20 per week for my personal expenditures, as though I were a child receiving an allowance. When I inquired about the remaining funds, he would invariably respond, Mother, I am strategically investing your savings to facilitate their growth. Place your trust in me. Subsequently, Savannah entered my life, a woman 25 years his junior, possessing a flawless smile and an ambition so palpable it could be discerned from a considerable distance. Ethan encountered her at his place of employment, where she served as a marketing assistant. A mere 6 months later, they solemnized their union in a ceremony that incurred expenses exceeding $100,000. My finances, naturally, bore the brunt of this extravagance. Ever since Savannah's integration into our household, circumstances have inexorably deteriorated. Ethan began to treat me with the deference afforded to a domestic staff member. Mother, prepare an elegant dinner for Savannah and myself. She is accustomed to refined fare. Mother, attend to the guest bathroom's cleanliness. Esteemed individuals are anticipated. Mother, launder this garment by hand. It is far too delicate for mechanical washing. I invariably complied. I acquiesced out of apprehension of his wrath, out of fear that he would enact his threat to evict me from my own domicile. For while the property legally belongs to me, Ethan artfully persuaded me to include his name on the deed, ostensibly for security purposes. He stated, Mother, purely as a precautionary measure should any unforeseen events befall you. The physical aggression commenced approximately a year ago. Initially, it was characterized by unintended shoves, progressing to forceful pinches on my arms when my actions deviated from his expectations. You are exasperating me, Mother. Your pace is excessively tardy. Subsequently, the violence escalated to blows upon my shoulders. Slaps delivered when the culinary preparations did not meet his approval, and forceful impacts to my back if my cleaning efforts were deemed insufficient. However, last night transcended all prior transgressions. Last night, he irrevocably crossed a boundary I never envisioned him breaching. I had prepared a simple vegetable soup for our evening sustenance. It was a Tuesday, and our customary fare on Tuesdays is light. I meticulously arranged the table, presented the toasted bread, and served the steaming soup. All was in order. Ethan arrived home, visibly fatigued from his workday, and without a word of greeting assumed his place at the table. He lifted the first spoonful to his lips, and his expression contorted. What in damnation is this? He bellowed, expelling the soup back into the bowl. It lacks any seasoning. It is as flavorless as water. I offered an immediate apology. I beg your pardon, son, I neglected to add salt. But it was too late. Ethan launched himself from the table with the ferocity of a wild beast, seized the soup bowl and hurled its contents directly into my visage. The scalding liquid seared my cheek. Fragments of porcelain inflicted a laceration upon my lip. You are utterly incompetent, he roared, gripping my arm with such force that I knew it would leave a prominent contusion. 40 years of service as a secretary, and you are incapable of preparing a passable soup. You are pathetic. He violently propelled me against the kitchen wall. My head struck the tiles with a resounding thud, and the world momentarily dissolved into a dizzying blur. Yet his aggression did not cease. He delivered a stinging slap that caused my ear to ring for hours. Then another and another in rapid succession. Savannah is entertaining friends for luncheon tomorrow, he informed me, his voice laced with menace while I covered my face with my hands. I expect you to prepare something exceptional, and you would be wise to ensure its perfection, for should you cause me embarrassment, should you betray even the slightest intimation of your inadequacy, I swear upon my very soul, I will cast you from this house. He then subsided as he invariably does after his physical outbursts. He stooped, assisted me to my feet, and daintily wiped the blood from my lip with a napkin. Forgive me, Mother, he murmured, his tone now softened. I merely become excessively frustrated observing your current state. I am aware of your potential for greater accomplishment. It is all for your ultimate benefit, so that you may learn. And with that he retired for the night, his slumber undisturbed, as if no transgression had occurred. I remained awake throughout the night in the kitchen, meticulously cleaning the remnants of the soup and the shattered porcelain fragments from the floor. Each shard I collected felt like a personal affront, a representation of my fractured self-worth. My lip continued to bleed, but the discomfort transcended mere physical pain. It was a deeper, more insidious agony. It was the stark, unassailable realization that my own son, the individual I cherished above all others, had transformed into my tormentor. As I cleaned, my mind began to retrace the sequence of events that led to this dire predicament. Ethan was not always this way. In his youth, he possessed a gentle and affectionate disposition. His father absconded when he was merely 8 years old, and from that point onward it was a solitary existence for him and me against the world. I toiled through countless double shifts for years, striving to furnish him with every conceivable necessity. I enrolled him in the most prestigious private institution my finances permitted. I procured designer attire for him, subsidized piano instruction, English language tutoring, and indeed every request he voiced. Perhaps therein lay my fundamental error. Perhaps my excessive indulgence rendered him incapable of comprehending the value of respect, of diligent effort, of genuine affection. I consistently provided him with everything, effortlessly, without demanding reciprocal gestures. And now, 35 years hence, I am the one bearing the burden of the consequences of those decisions. As dawn broke, I detected the familiar cadence of his footsteps descending the staircase. My heart began to race, a reaction that invariably accompanies his proximity. It is astonishing how one can exist in a perpetual state of heightened vigilance within the confines of their own residence. He entered the kitchen, already attired in his customary dark suit, his gaze fixed upon his mobile device, as was his morning routine. This particular morning, he did not even solicit breakfast. He simply assumed his position and awaited my service. I prepared his scrambled eggs, his black coffee, his 2 slices of toasted bread, all in an atmosphere of profound silence. He consumed his meal while simultaneously responding to electronic correspondences, treating me as though I were utterly invisible. At precisely 7:30, Savannah made her arrival. This time she was resplendent in a form-fitting yellow dress and elevated heels that echoed across the floor like percussive impacts. She appeared as radiant as ever. I often wonder if she ever perceives the bruises I conceal, the marks upon my arms, the involuntary flinch that escapes me whenever Ethan's voice escalates. "Good morning, Mrs. Davis," she greeted me, her smile as artificial as ever. "How are you feeling today?" "Content, thank you," I responded, perpetuating the charade. "Will you be partaking in nourishment?" "Merely a coffee, if you please," she replied, "a light preparation with artificial sweetener." As I poured her coffee, I detected her surreptitious glances in my direction. Her gaze momentarily lingered upon my swollen lip, upon the faint discoloration peeking from the collar of my blouse. For a fleeting instant I entertained the notion that she might voice a query, that she might inquire about the cause of my injuries, but instead she swiftly averted her eyes and returned her attention to her device. Ethan concluded his repast and fixed me with an intense stare. "Do you recall our discussion from last night, Mother? Savannah is hosting 3 of her associates for luncheon. I expect you to prepare a truly exceptional spread. Consider seafood, pasta, a Caesar salad, delectable desserts, and procure some superior quality white wine. Not that inferior swill you are accustomed to purchasing." He presented me with 3 $20 bills, an act he clearly perceived as an act of immense generosity. $60 to orchestrate a banquet for 5 individuals, a sum that pales in comparison to his expenditure on a single garment. "And one further directive," he added, leaning in to whisper conspiratorially in my ear, ensuring Savannah remained oblivious. "Apply that cosmetic I gifted you. Ensure those blemishes are thoroughly concealed. Should any of her companions pose inquiries of an unusual nature, should they offer any commentary regarding your appearance, you will face severe repercussions. Do you comprehend me?" I offered a brief nod, my hands exhibiting a slight tremor. He bestowed a paternalistic smile, kissed my forehead with the practiced affection of an exemplary son, and they departed in unison. The instant the door clicked shut, I collapsed onto a kitchen chair, overcome, $60 to prepare an elaborate luncheon. Fresh seafood alone would consume at least $30 per pound. The aforementioned superior wine, an additional 20. How precisely was I expected to conjure miracles from such meager resources? Yet it was not solely the financial constraints that caused me distress. It was the immense pressure to maintain an aura of normalcy in the presence of Savannah's guests, to feign the image of a contented mother-in-law presiding over an idyllic family unit, when the grim reality was that I was a victim of domestic abuse within my own home. I cautiously examined my reflection in the bathroom mirror and found myself a stranger. My lip was swollen and tinged with purple. A small fissure marked the corner of my mouth. My eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, testament to prolonged weeping. The livid mark on my neck resembled a dark stain creeping insidiously towards my clavicle. I retrieved the cosmetic meticulously chosen by Ethan. It was an opulent, imported foundation, the very sort favored by sophisticated women such as Savannah. I began its application with meticulous care, diligently obscuring every mark, every bruise, every piece of irrefutable evidence of the grim realities that unfolded within this household. As I applied the makeup, my thoughts drifted to the countless previous instances of this ritual. How many mornings had I awakened with the sole objective of concealing contusions, of fabricating plausible explanations concerning stumbles and unfortunate accidents. I inadvertently struck the table. The closet door slipped from my grasp. I lost my footing on the stairs. Each fabricated narrative was a desperate attempt to safeguard my son's reputation. I departed for the market, my meticulously crafted shopping list clutched in hand, my face a mask of carefully applied makeup. At the supermarket, I attempted to stretch the $60 as far as possible. I opted for frozen shrimp rather than fresh prawns, the most economical brand of wine that possessed an acceptable flavor profile. Pasta purchased during a promotional sale, every single cent was meticulously accounted for. As I waited in the checkout line, an elderly woman approached me. It was Clarice, my neighbor, a widow in her 60s, who had always extended unparalleled kindness to me. "Hello, Monica," she greeted me, her smile warm and genuine. "How are you, dear? I haven't seen you in the garden lately." "Hello, Clarice," I replied. "I am quite well, thank you. I've simply been rather occupied with domestic matters." She regarded me with an unblinking gaze, and I noticed her eyes inadvertently drift towards my lip, despite the cosmetic overlay. "Did you injure your mouth?" she inquired, her tone laced with genuine concern. My heart began to pound with alarming intensity. "No, it's nothing," I fibbed. "I merely encountered the closet door last night. You know how prone I am to clumsiness." Clarice's brow furrowed, but she did not press the issue. "Well, should you ever require assistance, you know precisely where I reside. I am invariably at home during the afternoons." Her words resonated deeply within me. It had been an immeasurable duration since anyone had offered me genuine solace, since anyone had extended such authentic compassion. For a moment, I harbored a desperate urge to confide in her, to implore her aid, to confess the harrowing nightmare that had become my existence. But Ethan's menacing voice echoed in the recesses of my mind. "If you ever open your mouth, if you dare to impart any knowledge of what transpires here, you will face profound regret. No one will believe your narrative. You are merely a senile woman subsisting on your son's charitable contributions. Thank you, Clarice, I responded, my voice barely a whisper. You are exceedingly kind. I re-entered the house and commenced an almost frenzied bout of cooking. Everything had to be meticulously prepared by noon, the appointed hour for Savannah and her entourage's arrival. I meticulously scoured the dwelling from top to bottom, adorned the table with the finest china inherited from my mother, and arranged a floral centerpiece. Every detail demanded perfection. As I cooked, my thoughts remained anchored to Clarice's parting words. If you ever require assistance, you know precisely where I reside. Did she harbor suspicions? Had she perhaps overheard the nocturnal outbursts emanating from my residence? At precisely 11:30, my mobile device chimed with an incoming call from an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Davis, is that you? A male voice inquired. Yes, this is she. This is the accountant from your son, Ethan's company. We require an urgent discussion concerning certain discrepancies within the ledger. Would it be feasible for you to visit our office this afternoon? My heart leaped into my throat. Discrepancies I do not comprehend. It would be preferable to avoid discussing this matter via telephone, Mrs. Davis. Can you attend at 3 this afternoon? It is of considerable importance. I terminated the call, my hands trembling uncontrollably. What clandestine activities might Ethan be involved in at his workplace? Why had they deemed it necessary to contact me? A profound sense of unease settled in my stomach, but I lacked the luxury of extended contemplation, for at that very moment Savannah and her companions were making their arrival. The doorbell rang precisely at midday. I took a deep, fortifying breath, applied a final touch-up to my makeup, and proceeded to open the door. There stood Savannah, accompanied by her 3 guests, each attired as if for a high-fashion event. Expensive dresses, designer handbags, footwear that surpassed my monthly pension in cost. "Hello, Mrs. Davis," Savannah announced, her voice resonating with that peculiar sweetness reserved for ceremonial occasions. "Allow me to introduce my esteemed friends. This is Beatrice, who serves in the Human Resources Department, Brenda, from the Marketing Division, and Evelyn, from the Legal Counsel's office." My heart nearly ceased its rhythm upon hearing Evelyn's name. This could not be a mere coincidence. I scrutinized her intently, and indeed it was she, Evelyn Brooks, my own younger sister, from whom I had been estranged for over 2 years. Evelyn's eyes widened in equal measure of surprise. However, we both maintained a facade of composure. She had always possessed a sharper intellect than I, a more cunning disposition. She instantly perceived that an unusual situation was unfolding, particularly noting the meticulously applied makeup and my visibly agitated demeanor. "It is a distinct pleasure to make your acquaintance, Mrs. Davis," she declared formally, as if we were strangers. "Your daughter-in-law has spoken of you with considerable admiration." I ushered them into the dining room, where I had meticulously laid out my most prized tablecloth, the exquisite china inherited from my maternal lineage, and the crystal glassware reserved exclusively for significant occasions. Every element exuded an air of refined elegance, precisely as Ethan had stipulated. I proceeded to serve the luncheon, endeavoring to maintain a steady hand. The shrimp pasta had turned out remarkably well, considering the budgetary constraints. The Caesar salad presented a visually appealing freshness. The bread was served warm. I even managed to craft a simple yet delightful tiramisu for dessert. The ladies partook of the meal, engaging in conversation regarding their professional lives, their personal aspirations, and their prospective weekend itineraries. I moved to and fro between the kitchen and the dining area, replenishing wine glasses and clearing used plates, with the practiced efficiency of the consummate hostess I was expected to be. However, Evelyn's gaze remained consistently fixed upon me. I recognized that particular look. It was the identical expression she employed in our childhood when she discerned that I was concealing something. "The cuisine is exquisite," Beatrice remarked. "Did you prepare all of this personally, Mrs. Davis?" "Indeed, I find immense satisfaction in culinary endeavors," I responded, my smile strained. "It is particularly rewarding when the recipients are as delightful as yourselves." "How extraordinarily fortunate Ethan is to possess such a devoted mother-in-law," Brenda added. "It is a rarity in this era to encounter women so dedicated to the domestic sphere." Savannah beamed with evident pride. "It is indeed true. Mrs. Davis consistently attends to every detail. It is akin to having a live-in housekeeper, but superior, for she performs these tasks with genuine affection." Her words struck me like a volley of sharp darts, yet I maintained my composed smile. A housekeeper. That was the extent of my perceived value in her eyes. Not a mother, not an individual, possessing inherent rights and dignity, but rather a gratis domestic servant. Evelyn cleared her throat. "And what was your profession prior to this, Mrs. Davis? Was your career always confined to the domestic sphere?" I felt a flicker of pride, a sensation I hadn't experienced in what felt like ages. "For 40 years I dedicated myself to the esteemed law firm of Sullivan and Associates as an executive secretary. 3 years ago I embraced retirement." Evelyn's eyes sparkled with recognition. Sullivan and Associates held a significant reputation as one of the city's most esteemed legal practices, a place where she herself had completed an internship during her legal studies. "How remarkable!" she exclaimed. "I'm quite familiar with that firm. Their standing is exceptional." "You must have encountered numerous prominent individuals over the span of your career." "Indeed," I confirmed, a more genuine smile gracing my lips. "My professional path intersected with judges, prosecutors, and leading legal minds. I even played a role in significant legal battles. Mr. Sullivan consistently referred to me as indispensable." Savannah shifted uncomfortably as the conversation veered in this direction. She seemed displeased by the focus on me and the discussion of my professional achievements. Swiftly, she steered the topic elsewhere. "However, Mrs. Davis is now retired, enjoying a well-earned period of repose," she remarked, her smile artificial. "Ethan manages all her affairs, from financial matters to her daily needs. He is such a dutiful son." Evelyn observed me closely as Savannah uttered these words. I know my sister well, and those words felt incongruous coming from her. A woman with a 40-year tenure at a distinguished law firm would not require her son to oversee her finances. The remainder of the luncheon proceeded with desultory chatter, yet I sensed a palpable undercurrent of tension. Evelyn's gaze remained fixed upon me, and I was certain she detected that something was amiss. When I excused myself to retrieve dessert from the kitchen, she followed. "Do you require any assistance?" she inquired, though her true intention was to secure a private moment for conversation. "No, thank you, everything is in order," I responded, evading her direct gaze. "Monica," she said softly, using my given name for the first time that afternoon. "Are you all right? You seem different." For a brief interval, my usual defenses crumbled. I yearned to embrace her, to confide in her, to implore her assistance. But at that very instant, the distinct sound of Ethan's keys at the front door reached my ears. He had returned from work earlier than anticipated. "Everything is perfectly fine, Evelyn. I'm simply a bit weary," I said hastily. Ethan entered the dining area, his face adorned with the polished smile he reserved for guests. He offered the ladies cordial greetings, bestowed a kiss upon Savannah's cheek, and then met my gaze with an expression of approval. The lunch had unfolded precisely as he had orchestrated. "How are the most elegant ladies gracing our presence today?" he inquired, employing the disingenuous charm he so readily displayed in public. "I trust my mother has been an impeccable hostess." "Excellently," Beatrice responded. "Your mother is truly delightful." Ethan placed his hand on my shoulder and an involuntary tension seized me. He perceived my reaction and applied a gentle pressure, a silent admonishment. "She is the finest mother in existence," he declared, his fingers pressing insistently through the fabric of my blouse. "Always attentive to everyone's needs, perpetually making sacrifices for our family." Following dessert, the ladies began to take their leave. Evelyn was the last to depart. As she reached the doorway, she took my hand. "It has been an absolute pleasure meeting you, Mrs. Davis," she stated in a volume intended for Ethan to hear. Then, leaning in, she whispered, "We shall convene again shortly." Once the last guest had departed, Ethan secured the door, his demeanor undergoing a complete transformation. The facade of the devoted son evaporated, revealing the unvarnished monster beneath. "You conducted yourself appropriately," he stated icily. "For once you managed not to disgrace me." This was not a compliment, but a confirmation that I had adequately fulfilled my role as his subordinate. While I attended to the dishes and tidied the dining room, he retreated to his chamber to change. Before leaving, however, he issued a final directive. "Incidentally, the technician is scheduled to visit tomorrow to inspect your computer. He mentioned that you've been frequenting rather unusual websites." A chilling sensation coursed through me. I possessed no personal computer. My access was limited to his and only when absolutely necessary. The only peculiar searches I had undertaken recently pertained to domestic violence resources, shelters for abused women, and crisis hotlines. He was aware of my inquiries, aware that I was contemplating seeking assistance. At that very moment, my phone rang. It was the accountant from Ethan's firm again. "Mrs. Davis, could you possibly come to the office at 3 this afternoon? It is a matter of urgency." I glanced at the clock. It read 2:15. Ethan was likely napping in his room. This was my opportunity. "Yes," I replied in a subdued tone, "I shall be there." I gathered my keys and purse and discreetly exited the residence. I was uncertain of what awaited me at the office, but I harbored a premonition that my life was poised for an irreversible shift. As I made my way to the bus stop, Evelyn's parting words echoed in my mind. "We shall convene again shortly." My sister had sensed something amiss, and for the first time in a considerable period, a fragile ember of hope ignited within me. The office building housing Ethan's company was a quintessential modern downtown skyscraper, its glass and steel facade exuding an imposing presence. I had never set foot there before. For all these years, my son had maintained a strict separation between his professional life and my existence, as though it were a closely guarded secret. Ascending to the 18th floor, I found myself at the offices of Northern Business Corporation. The receptionist, a young woman with a practiced smile, directed me to the accountant's office. My heart pounded with such ferocity that I feared it was audible to everyone. "Mrs. Davis," a man in his 50s, clad in a formal suit and spectacles, greeted me. "I am Adrian Castillo, the company's general accountant. Thank you for coming so promptly." I settled into the chair opposite his desk, endeavoring to project an air of composure despite the tremor that coursed through me. His gaze held a gravity that amplified my apprehension. "Ma'am, I need to inquire about your bank account," he began, opening a file replete with documents, "specifically regarding certain transactions we have observed in recent months." "I don't quite understand," I stammered, my voice quivering. What connection does my personal account have with the company? Adrian regarded me with a mixture of sympathy and concern. Mrs. Davis, we have discovered evidence that your son, Ethan, has been utilizing company funds to facilitate transfers to your personal bank account. These funds are subsequently withdrawn from your account. The revelation struck me with the force of a physical blow. That is impossible. Ethan is an exemplary employee. He would never engage in such behavior. I'm afraid he has, Adrian stated, presenting me with a series of official documents. Over the past 6 months, he has misappropriated over $50,000 in corporate funds. The money initially appears in his personal account, only to be immediately transferred to the joint account he shares with you. My world fractured. $50,000. My son was not merely inflicting physical abuse, he was orchestrating my unwitting complicity in his illicit activities. But I was unaware of any of it, I protested, my voice laced with desperation. He manages my entire bank account. I authorize no transfers. We understand that, Adrian said gently. That is precisely why I contacted you before initiating legal proceedings. We require you to file a formal complaint regarding the unauthorized use of your bank account. It is the sole means by which your name can be cleared in this matter. A wave of nausea washed over me. Not only had I been a victim of domestic violence, but now I was also ensnared in a web of financial deceit. And, most devastatingly, my own son had unknowingly transformed me into an accomplice in his crimes. What will become of Ethan? I inquired, though the answer was already grimly apparent. If you file the complaint, he will be apprehended for embezzlement of corporate funds and fraudulent use of bank accounts. These are grave offences, punishable by 5 to 10 years in prison. I departed from that office in a state of profound shock. I wandered the downtown streets for hours, aimlessly, attempting to process the overwhelming cascade of information. My son was a thief, a criminal, and I, unknowingly, had been his instrument. By the time I finally returned home, it was 6 in the evening. Ethan occupied the living room, engrossed in television as if it were any ordinary day. Upon my arrival, he regarded me with his characteristic air of condescending superiority. "Where have you been?" he demanded, his tone accusatory. "I returned from work and you were absent. The house was in disarray after lunch." For the first time in years, I met his gaze directly, refusing to avert my eyes. "I was at your office." His expression shifted instantaneously. The veneer of composure faltered, and I glimpsed raw fear in his eyes. "What did you say?" "I was at your office, Ethan. I spoke with the accountant. I am aware of your actions." He rose from the sofa with a deliberate slowness, like a predator poised to strike. "I haven't the faintest idea what you are implying, Mother," he said, attempting to regain control. "I believe you are mistaken." 50,000, I repeated, my voice gaining an unexpected firmness. $50,000 you have pilfered from your company using my bank account. Ethan advanced towards me, and for the first time in a long while, I did not retreat. Something within me had undergone a transformation that afternoon. Perhaps it was knowing that I was not alone, that others were aware of the truth. "Listen to me, you foolish old woman," he hissed, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You have no comprehension of the gravity of your words. That money is rightfully mine. You owe me for every penny I have invested in you over these years, the food you consume, the roof over your head, the clothes you wear. With my own earnings," I counted, my voice steady, "my pension, my savings, the fruits of my 40 years of labor." He grasped my arm, but this time I refused to remain silent. "Release me!" I shrieked with the full extent of my vocal capacity. His surprise at my defiance was evident. He actually released his grip. For 3 years I had been his silent victim. Now, for the first time, I was confronting him with a roar. "You're delusional," he declared, though his voice lacked its former conviction. "No one will believe you. You are a senile old woman who has lost touch with reality." "The accountant believed me," I informed him. "The documents are irrefutable. The transfers are recorded. Everything is meticulously documented." Ethan fell silent for several moments, absorbing the implications. Then his expression hardened further. "If you utter a single word, if you file any form of complaint, I swear I will ruin you." His threat was palpable. "This house is also registered in my name. I can have you out on the street tomorrow, and without my support, without my financial aid, you will perish alone, like a stray dog." Yet for the first time his threats held no sway over me. A newfound strength resided within me, a resilience I had not previously recognized. "I am no longer afraid of you, Ethan," I declared, and in uttering the words I realized their profound truth. "For the first time in 3 years, I am not afraid of you." He raised his hand as if to strike me, but precisely at that moment the doorbell chimed. It was Clarice, my neighbor. "Monica!" she called out from the exterior, her voice laced with concern. "Monica, is everything all right? I heard shouting." Ethan slowly lowered his hand. He could not strike me with a witness present. His reputation was paramount. "Go see what she wants," he commanded through gritted teeth, "and you had better not utter anything untoward." I moved to open the door, my legs trembling. Clarice stood there, her face etched with worry, holding a casserole dish. "Hello, dear," she said to me. "I brought you some stew I prepared, but I heard loud voices and became concerned." Over her shoulder, I discerned the presence of another woman. It was Evelyn, my sister. She was dressed casually, her hair pulled back, but I recognized her instantly. "Hello," Evelyn greeted me, feigning unfamiliarity. "I'm new to the neighborhood and was just visiting Mrs. Davis. I hope we're not imposing." Ethan materialized behind me, his artificial smile perfectly in place. "Not at all, ladies. My mother was a bit flustered because she accidentally burned the dinner. You know how older women can be about such things." Clarice met his gaze with an unreadable expression. "Indeed," she replied. "Well, Monica, here is the food, and remember, if you require anything whatsoever, I am just next door." Evelyn looked directly into my eyes. "Yes, Mrs. Davis, anything you need, day or night." After they departed, Ethan slammed the door shut. "Damn meddling old women," he muttered, "but this is far from over. Tomorrow we will go to the bank together and you will sign every document I present to you. You will retract the complaint you have undoubtedly already filed, and you will declare that this entire episode was a significant misunderstanding." "No," I stated simply. "What do you mean, no? I will not sign anything. I will not retract any complaint, and I will no longer be an accomplice to your thefts." Ethan regarded me with a fury I had never witnessed before. It was as if he had shed all his pretense, revealing his true monstrous nature. "Very well," he declared, his calm more terrifying than any outburst. "If that is your choice, we shall proceed accordingly. But I caution you, when I am finished with you, you will wish you had never been born." That night, sleep eluded me. Ethan remained confined to his room, but I could hear him engaged in prolonged phone conversations. I had no inkling of his plans, but I knew I had to brace myself for the worst. At 3 in the morning, I heard an unusual sound emanating from the yard. Peering out the window, I observed a figure moving amongst the shrubbery. It was Clarice, and she appeared to be positioning something near my window. The next day, I understood her actions. She had discreetly installed a small security camera, concealed amongst the foliage, trained on my residence. My neighbor suspected that something untoward was occurring, and was meticulously documenting the events. The following day dawned overcast and rainy, as if mirroring the tempest brewing within my life. Ethan arose earlier than usual at 5 in the morning. I heard him stirring throughout the house, engaged in hushed telephone conversations, meticulously preparing for something that filled me with an unsettling dread. When I descended to the kitchen, he was already attired in his finest suit, the charcoal ensemble he donned for pivotal business meetings. His hair was impeccably styled, his tie perfectly knotted. He presented the image of the successful executive everyone perceived him to be, not the malevolent entity residing under my roof. "Good morning, Mother," he greeted me, his voice possessing an unnervingly sweet, almost melodic cadence. "I trust you slept well." That saccharine tone sent a shiver down my spine. I knew my son intimately enough to recognize that his affability was invariably a prelude to some diabolical scheme. "Yes," I lied, serving him his morning coffee as was my daily ritual. "Indeed," he replied, his smile failing to reach his eyes. "For today promises to be an exceptionally significant occasion. I have contemplated our discussion from yesterday throughout the night." He took his seat at the table and commenced his breakfast with an air of nonchalance, as if we were a typical family. Yet an unsettling element in his demeanor kept me perpetually on high alert. "I have concluded that you are correct," he continued. "Perhaps I have been overly demanding. After all, you are my mother and you deserve my respect." His words left me utterly bewildered. Ethan admitting fault, seeking absolution. It was so profoundly out of character that I instinctively recognized it as a calculated ploy. "Therefore," he proceeded, spreading butter on his toast, "we shall proceed to the bank today. We will resolve this entire misunderstanding with my company. You will explain that you authorized all the transfers, that you were fully cognizant of every financial transaction involving your funds." There it was, the true motive behind his disingenuous kindness. "I will not do that, Ethan," I stated, striving to maintain a steady voice. His smile gradually dissolved. "Of course you will, Mother, because if you do not, a series of exceedingly unpleasant consequences will ensue." "Are you threatening me?" "No, Mother," he responded, finishing his coffee. "I am merely delineating the reality of our situation. Observe your surroundings. This house, this table at which you partake in breakfast, the bed upon which you sleep, the sustenance you consume, all of this is contingent upon my benevolence, and if my benevolence ceases—" He left the statement hanging, the implication chillingly clear. He intended to cast me out onto the streets if I refused to comply. "Furthermore," he added, retrieving his phone, "I have considered contacting certain physicians. I know of doctors who specialize in geriatrics with cognitive impairments such as senile dementia. You understand, it is profoundly distressing when mothers begin to fabricate narratives accusing their own sons of egregious transgressions." My blood turned to ice. He was not only threatening to evict me, but to have me legally declared insane, incompetent, thereby rendering my testimony entirely inadmissible. "There are several individuals who can attest to your deteriorating mental faculties," he continued, his voice cold and calculating. "Savannah, for instance, I merely conveyed to her yesterday how disoriented you have been of late. The guests from lunch, too, he implied, had perceived my confusion. It was a fabrication, yet his conviction was so absolute that for a fleeting moment I doubted my own sanity. Such was the efficacy of his manipulation. He could instill doubt in anything, even my own perception of reality. "Therefore we shall depart for the bank at 10 o'clock, he stated, rising from the table. "You will don your finest attire. You will present yourself impeccably, and you will smile while affixing your signature to every document placed before you. Do you comprehend?" I offered no reply. busying myself with clearing the breakfast dishes, attempting to gain precious moments to formulate a plan. "I am addressing you," he bellowed, all pretense of simulated kindness vanishing instantly. "Do you comprehend?" "Yes," I mumbled, consumed by self-loathing for my perceived cowardice. Ethan retreated to his study, but before departing he issued a stern warning. "Do not even contemplate leaving this residence. Do not even consider speaking with anyone on the telephone. I will return at 9:30 to escort you to the bank." The instant the door clicked shut, I sank into a kitchen chair, tears streaming down my face. They were not tears of sorrow, but of pure, unadulterated rage. Rage directed at him, but more acutely, rage directed at myself for allowing this situation to escalate to such a critical point. I remained in this state for several minutes until a soft rapping at the back door interrupted my distress. It was Clarice, her face contorted with urgency. "Monica, open up quickly," she whispered through the glass. "It is imperative." I unlatched the door and she entered with haste, casting furtive glances around to ensure we were unobserved. "I overheard everything," she stated without preamble. "I have positioned the camera near your kitchen window. I recorded your entire conversation with your son." My heart began to pound with an accelerated rhythm. "Everything?" she confirmed. "The threats, the blackmail, the way he spoke to you. I have concrete evidence that he is coercing you into lying about the stolen funds." For the first time in days, a glimmer of hope pierced the darkness. "What can we do with this information?" Clarice offered a reassuring smile. "I have a friend who works at the district attorney's office. Her name is Brenda, and she specializes in cases involving domestic abuse and financial fraud. But I need you to accompany me immediately." "I cannot," I replied, a resurgence of fear seizing me. Ethan explicitly forbade me from leaving the house. "If he discovers this, Monica," Clarice implored, taking my hands, her voice earnest, "listen to me very carefully. If you go to that bank today and sign those documents, your son will be absolved of all charges. He will continue to steal money and perpetrate abuse against you. Furthermore, you will be construed as a willing participant in his criminal activities." She was unequivocally correct. If I affixed my signature to those papers, I would not only forfeit my dignity, but would also become a criminal in the eyes of the law. "But if I refuse to go," I faltered, my voice trembling, "he will enact his threats. He will expel me from the house. He will declare me mentally unsound. He will be unable to do any of that," Clarice interrupted, "because we will present the evidence before he has the opportunity to act. Brenda informed me that with the recordings I possess, they can apprehend him immediately." I glanced at the clock. It was 8:30. Ethan would return in approximately 1 hour. "Are you entirely certain your friend can assist me?" "Absolutely certain. But we must depart now, Monica. This is our sole recourse." I made a decision that would irrevocably alter the trajectory of my life. I proceeded to my bedroom, gathered my purse containing my essential documents, and departed that oppressive domicile with Clarice. As we walked towards her vehicle, I experienced a sensation I had not felt in 3 years. Courage. For the first time, I was actively reclaiming control of my own destiny. The district attorney's office presented as a typical government edifice, characterized by lengthy corridors and modest office spaces. Brenda emerged as a woman in her 40s, possessing an astute gaze and a manner of speaking that engendered unwavering confidence. "Davis," she stated, having just reviewed the recordings that Clarice had brought with her, "what your son is engaged in constitutes a multitude of offenses. These include domestic violence, financial deception, extortion, and an attempted thwarting of the justice process." "What exactly does that signify?" I inquired. It signifies that we possess the grounds to apprehend him this very day, Brenda responded. However, I require you to formally lodge a complaint detailing each of these alleged crimes. Are you prepared to undertake such a task? I glanced at the clock. It read 9:15. In precisely 15 minutes, Ethan was scheduled to arrive home with the intention of escorting me to the bank. The moment he discovered my absence, his fury would erupt uncontrollably. Yes, I affirmed, feeling a newfound resolve solidify my voice. I am prepared to proceed with filing the complaint. Brenda's face broke into a smile. Excellent. While you complete the necessary paperwork, I will liaise with the police department to arrange for their immediate dispatch to apprehend your son. Do you have knowledge of his current whereabouts? He should be arriving at my residence shortly, I replied. He indicated he would be here to collect me at 9:30. Even more convenient, Brenda remarked, reaching for her mobile device. It is considerably simpler to effect an arrest at a known location. As I meticulously filled out the complaint forms, Brenda concurrently coordinated with law enforcement officials. Clarice remained by my side throughout the entire ordeal, offering a comforting hand and bolstering my courage. Are you absolutely certain about this course of action, Monica? She inquired, her gaze fixed on mine. Once our signatures are affixed to these documents, there is no recourse for reversal. I have never held a more unwavering conviction about anything in my entire existence, I declared. At 10:30, Brenda's telephone chimed. It was the police, confirming that they had successfully apprehended Ethan at my home. They reported finding him in a state of uncontrolled agitation, smashing objects and frantically searching for me throughout the premises. He is currently in custody, Brenda informed me. The charges are substantial, and it is highly probable that he will be denied bail. A profound sense of liberation washed over me, as if a colossal burden had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in 3 years, I felt a genuine certainty that I would be able to sleep soundly, free from apprehension. Upon our return to my house that afternoon, the interior presented a scene of utter devastation. Ethan had, in his unrestrained wrath, demolished nearly everything in his path before the authorities could take him into custody. The cushions of the sofa were ripped and strewn about. Shards of broken crockery littered the kitchen floor, and the cherished family photographs adorning the walls lay shattered into countless fragments. My goodness, Clarice whispered, surveying the scene of destruction. How could he have wrought so much havoc in such a brief span of time? I understood the answer implicitly. I was intimately familiar with the blind fury that consumed Ethan when his will was thwarted. I had witnessed such incandescent rage before, but never directed at mere inanimate objects. Typically, I was the sole recipient of his anger. Brenda, who had accompanied us to meticulously document the extent of the damage, was diligently photographing every detail. This will serve as further corroboration of his volatile disposition, she explained. The willful destruction of property during an episode of intense rage. The judge will gain a precise understanding of your son's character. While we were engaged in the arduous task of sweeping up the fragmented glass and collecting the remnants of my formerly peaceful existence, my mobile telephone began to ring with insistent persistence. It was an unrecognized number. Do not answer it, Brenda cautioned me. It is almost certainly him calling from the detention facility. Allow it to go to voicemail. Indeed, upon accessing the retrieved messages, I recognized Ethan's voice, though it was undeniably altered from its earlier aggressive tone. It was no longer the menacing entity from that morning. Instead, it conveyed the frightened vulnerability of a child, the same persona he adopted when seeking to manipulate me. "Mom," his voice quavered on the recording. "Mom, please, you must extricate me from this place. It was all a dreadful misunderstanding. My intention was never to cause you harm. You are aware of my profound love for you. You are, without question, the most significant person in my existence. Please, Mum, do not permit me to languish in this correctional institution. I am your son, your sole progeny." He had left a total of 5 such messages, each progressively more desperate than the last. In his final plea, he was even weeping. "This is a calculated element of his manipulative strategy," Brenda explained to me. "First, aggression and threats, followed by feigned victimhood and attempts to instill guilt. This is a well-established pattern observed in individuals who perpetrate abuse." Despite my rational comprehension of the situation, the sound of my son's despondent cries pierced my heart. For 35 years he had been my cherished infant, the very essence of my life's purpose. It proved an immense challenge to reconcile the monstrous individual he had become with the tender boy he once was. "Are you quite all right?" Clarice inquired, noticing the profound sadness etched upon my countenance. "It is a complex emotional landscape," I admitted. "While I am certain I have made the correct decision, he remains unequivocally my son." That evening, Clarice insisted that I remain at her residence. "Your home is not currently a secure environment," she advised me. "Ethan possesses associates, and it is conceivable that Savannah might also be involved. Someone could potentially seek retribution." She was absolutely correct. In the voicemail messages, Ethan had alluded to Savannah actively managing matters from the outside. I lacked a clear understanding of his precise meaning, but the prospect filled me with trepidation. Clarice's dwelling, though modest in size, exuded a comforting warmth. It featured a guest chamber furnished with a twin-sized bed and a compact writing desk. "This was my daughter's room prior to her marriage," she explained. "Now it is at your disposal for as long as you require it." For the initial occasion in 3 years, I retired to bed without a shadow of fear. The familiar anxieties associated with Ethan's heavy footsteps in the hallway, his late-night outbursts, or the dread of waking to physical assault were absent. It was a peculiar, almost disconcerting sensation. Tranquility, too, can be unsettling when one is unaccustomed to its presence. The subsequent morning, Brenda contacted me early with significant developments. "Ethan's bail hearing is scheduled for 2 o'clock this afternoon," she informed me. "The judge will render a decision regarding his potential release pending the trial." "What are the probabilities of his release?" I inquired, a resurgence of anxiety gripping me. "Given the evidence we have amassed, the likelihood is exceedingly slim. However, your presence and testimony at the hearing are imperative. Your account will be instrumental in enabling the judge to fully comprehend the imminent danger he poses." The hearing convened in a modestly sized courtroom. Ethan occupied a seat at the defense table, clad in an orange correctional uniform. The moment he perceived my entry, his facial expression underwent a dramatic transformation. The semblance of the contrite child from the voicemails vanished entirely, replaced by an aura of tightly contained fury. Savannah was seated in the public gallery, impeccably attired as always, yet her appearance suggested a profound weariness, as though sleep had eluded her for days. As our gazes met, I discerned an unexpected emotion in her eyes: shame. The presiding judge, an elder gentleman in his 60s, possessed a demeanor that was both serious and equitable. He meticulously reviewed all submitted documentation before commencing the proceedings. "Mrs. Davis," he addressed me when it was my turn to offer testimony, "please recount in your own words the circumstances you have endured within your household over the past several years." I drew a deep, steadying breath and commenced my narrative. I detailed the instances of physical abuse, the pervasive control exerted over my finances, the relentless threats, and the constant humiliation I had experienced. My voice faltered at intervals, yet I persevered. Upon my mention of the $50,000 he had absconded with, I observed Ethan stiffen in his seat. His legal counsel, a young man adorned in an expensive suit, attempted to interject numerous objections, but the judge promptly silenced him. "And what did your son communicate to you yesterday morning regarding your intended testimony?" the judge inquired. "He threatened to have me declared mentally unfit should I fail to provide false testimony on his behalf. He declared he would cast me out onto the streets, leaving me with absolutely nothing." The judge then proceeded to review the audio recordings that Clarice had meticulously compiled. He listened to them in their entirety, utilizing headphones, while the entire courtroom awaited in profound silence. "Mr. Ethan Davis," the judge stated upon concluding his review, "the evidence presented unequivocally demonstrates a consistent pattern of domestic violence, financial fraud, and intimidation of witnesses. In consideration of the gravity of the accusations and the inherent risk you present to the victim, your request for bail is hereby denied. You shall remain in custody until the scheduled date of your trial." Ethan erupted. "This is an absolute travesty of justice," he bellowed, leaping to his feet. "That deranged old woman is fabricating everything. I am a respected member of society. I possess rights." The attending guards were compelled to restrain him as his vociferous protests continued. "You will deeply regret this, mother," he screamed. "When I am eventually released from this place, I will ensure you pay dearly for every single day I am forced to spend incarcerated." His threats reverberated through the entire courtroom, serving as irrefutable confirmation of the violent nature I had so vividly described in my testimony. Following the conclusion of the hearing, Savannah approached me within the confines of the courthouse. "Mrs. Davis," she began, her voice trembling, "I must speak with you." Brenda and Clarice tensed perceptibly, but I offered them a reassuring gesture indicating my composure. "What is it you wish to discuss, Savannah?" I inquired. "I wish to offer my sincerest apologies," she stated, and for the first time in the entire duration of our acquaintance, her voice carried an undeniable ring of sincerity. "I was aware that something was amiss within that household. I overheard your shouts. I observed the bruises on your person. I noticed how you would flinch instinctively every time his voice was raised." "Then why, pray tell, did you never vocalize your concerns?" I pressed. "Because I was paralyzed by fear," she confessed. "Ethan had also issued threats against me. He declared that if I ever betrayed him, he would systematically dismantle my career, annihilate my reputation, and I was, in essence, a coward. I allowed you to endure such suffering in solitude because I was terrified of forfeiting my comfortable existence." Her eyes welled with tears. "When they took him into custody yesterday, I discovered documentation within his home office. He had not solely been engaged in embezzling funds from his company. He had also been pilfering from my personal accounts. We have been married for 2 years, and I had absolutely no inkling that he was a fraudulent individual." "What course of action do you intend to pursue now?" I asked. "I shall be initiating divorce proceedings immediately," she declared with unwavering determination, "and I will personally provide testimony against him during his trial. I have already consulted with legal counsel. My intention is to collaborate fully with the district attorney's office to ensure he is held accountable for every transgression he has inflicted upon us." As we exited the courthouse, I experienced a sensation I had not felt in years, genuine hope. Not only had I managed to extricate myself from my son's oppressive influence, but I now possessed allies in my pursuit of justice. That afternoon, as we made our way back to Clarice's residence, Brenda delivered further encouraging news. "The corporation where Ethan was employed is amenable to reaching a settlement," she informed me. "They are willing to refrain from pursuing additional charges against you. provided you cooperate by returning the misappropriated funds. Furthermore, as a gesture of acknowledgement for your status as a victim of fraud, they have agreed to provide you with a compensatory sum of $20,000. $20,000! It represented more liquid capital than I had possessed access to in the preceding 3 years. What about my house? I inquired, a flicker of apprehension returning. Ethan had asserted that it was also registered in his name. We have thoroughly examined the documentation, Brenda stated, a smile gracing her lips. Your son was untruthful. The deed remains exclusively in your name. He may have forged certain papers, but legally the property unequivocally belongs to you. For the first time in a considerable period, I began to envision a viable future, a future characterized by freedom from fear, the autonomy to make my own decisions, and the empowerment to be the master of my own destiny. However, I was acutely aware that Ethan was unlikely to relinquish his pursuit of control without a significant struggle. His threats uttered during the hearing had been starkly clear. This conflict was, in all probability, just commencing. 3 weeks subsequent to Ethan's apprehension, my existence had undergone a profound transformation, though not in the manner I had initially anticipated. Although I was physically secure within Clarice's home, I remained psychologically ensnared by his influence. I had developed a pervasive sense of paranoia that disturbed my sleep on most nights. Every unexpected noise would cause me to start. Any vehicle that halted in front of the house would prompt me to rush to the window. Every unsolicited telephone call would trigger a full-blown panic attack. Brenda had explained that such reactions were normal, that after enduring years of abuse, the ingrained fear does not dissipate instantaneously. This is post-traumatic stress disorder, she had explained. Your mind and body have become accustomed to operating in a perpetual state of heightened alert. The process of healing will require considerable time. Yet there was an element beyond mere psychological trauma. Ethan had managed to convey messages to me from his detention cell, messages that sent shivers of dread down my spine. The initial communication arrived through an intermediary lawyer, one who was not officially representing him. It was a handwritten epistle, penned in a script that was all too familiar to me. Dear Mother, it commenced, I trust you are relishing your minor triumph. I hope you feel exceedingly brave for betraying me. However, I wish for you to comprehend something of paramount importance. This is far from over. I possess knowledge concerning you that no one else is privy to. Secrets that you have meticulously guarded for 40 years during your tenure at that legal firm. Information that could irrevocably tarnish not only your reputation, but also jeopardize your personal liberty. My heart constricted when I read those chilling words. What secrets? Throughout my 40 years as a secretary at Sullivan and Associates, I had, of course, handled confidential information, but I had never engaged in any illicit activities. Do you recall the case of Williams versus the state? Mother, the one from 15 years ago? I have discovered the documents you concealed, the ones you deliberately altered to assist Mr. Sullivan in securing that multi-million-dollar verdict. Documents which, if they were to surface, could result in your incarceration for obstruction of justice. My hands began to tremble uncontrollably. The Williams case was a vague recollection. It had been a challenging legal battle where the firm represented a pharmaceutical entity accused of deliberately withholding information regarding the fatal side effects of a particular medication. Mr. Sullivan had instructed me to meticulously organize certain documents, specifically to remove certain memos that could prove detrimental to his client's position. At the time, I had perceived this as a standard professional obligation, an inherent part of my duties as a secretary. The profound legal ramifications of my actions had eluded me completely. Yet Ethan was undeniably correct. I had, in effect, tampered with evidence in a court case. I possess copies of everything, Mother, and if you do not withdraw the charges against me, if you do not publicly recant your accusations and admit to your falsehoods, those documents will inevitably find their way into the district attorney's possession. Imagine the headlines. 61-year-old secretary arrested for complicity in cover-up of drug-related fatalities. The remainder of the letter meticulously detailed his plan to systematically dismantle my life should I fail to comply. He boasted of his connections within the media and his acquaintance with journalists who would readily compensate him handsomely for a sensational story of judicial corruption. My likeness would be prominently displayed in every newspaper, and my name would be indelibly associated with a widespread scandal. Upon discovering me weeping, clutching the letter in my trembling hands, Clarice immediately contacted Brenda. "This is an undeniable act of blackmail," Brenda stated emphatically after perusing the letter. "However, we must ascertain whether his threats possess any basis in reality. What precisely do you recall about the Williams case?" I recounted every detail I could remember, including the explicit instructions Mr. Sullivan had given me regarding the reorganization of the legal documents. "Were you aware that your actions could be construed as illegal?" she inquired. "No," I answered with complete honesty. "I was merely following directives. Mr. Sullivan had assured me that it was standard procedure for safeguarding client confidentiality." Brenda emitted a weary sigh. Legally speaking, ignorance is rarely considered a valid defense. If you did indeed alter evidence, even if it was without malicious intent, you have technically committed an offense. My world imploded once more. Just as I believed I had escaped Ethan's malevolent grip, he had discovered yet another means to exert control over me. "What am I to do?" I pleaded desperately. "If I retract the charges, he will be released and will undoubtedly seek my destruction. If I persist, I face imprisonment for an action I undertook 15 years ago, entirely unaware of its illegality." "First and foremost, endeavour to remain calm," Brenda advised. "Secondly, we shall meticulously investigate the precise nature of the documents your son possesses and ascertain how he came into their possession. And thirdly, we will diligently explore avenues to mitigate any potential legal repercussions should it transpire that incriminating evidence indeed exists against you." The ensuing days were an agonizing descent into a legal quagmire. Brenda collaborated with a specialized team of attorneys, focusing on antiquated cases to meticulously review the entirety of the Williams case file. Concurrently, I existed in a perpetual state of abject terror, anticipating the imminent arrival of law enforcement to effect my arrest at any given moment. Clarice emerged as my unwavering salvation during those profoundly bleak weeks. Not only did she provide me with sanctuary within her abode, but she evolved into the sister I had always yearned for but never possessed. Each evening she would sit with me as I succumbed to tears, prepare soothing chamomile tea to facilitate my sleep, and steadfastly reiterate the comforting assurance that I was not alone. "No matter the outcome," she would declare, "we shall confront it together. You are no longer that frightened woman who lived under the constant shadow of her son's tyranny." Yet I felt precisely like that terrified woman. Ethan had succeeded in achieving his objective. He had re-ensnared me in the suffocating grip of fear and despair that had defined my existence for the preceding 3 years. A week later, a second letter arrived, imbued with an even more venomous tone than the first. "I observe that you have not yet comprehended your lesson, Mother. I perceive that you still believe you can defy me. That is perfectly acceptable. Now everyone shall be made aware of the true individual you are." Accompanying the letter was an envelope containing photographic prints. These were, without question, images of documents. internal memos from the Sullivan and Associates firm, bearing my own distinctive handwriting, annotated with marginalia, detailing altered dates, and indicating pages that had been excised from original files. These photographs will be disseminated to the newspapers tomorrow evening. If you do not make arrangements to visit me in prison before Friday, you will do so alone, devoid of legal representation, unaccompanied by any witnesses, and you will present a signed document formally requesting the withdrawal of all charges levied against me, citing a misunderstanding precipitated by your mental deterioration. My mental deterioration. That accusation sent a fresh wave of icy dread through my veins. If you fail to comply, not only will these photographs inundate the media, but you will also witness the recordings. Recordings? What recordings? Did you truly believe I was unaware of the surveillance cameras you strategically installed throughout the house? Mother, did you honestly perceive me as that dim-witted? I too possess recordings. Recordings of you accepting cash payments from clients at the firm. Funds that you conspicuously failed to report as income. Tax evasion, Mother. An additional 15 years of incarceration await you. This was no longer mere blackmail. It was a full-scale psychological assault. Ethan had meticulously orchestrated this intricate scheme for months, perhaps even years. He had amassed incriminating evidence, meticulously planned every strategic maneuver, and presciently anticipated my defiance. Upon perusing the second missive, Brenda's countenance became exceedingly grave. Monica, it is imperative that you provide me with an unvarnished account of your tenure at the firm. Disclose any actions you may have undertaken, any irregularities you encountered, any financial emoluments you received beyond your stipulated salary. I recounted the instances of cash-based Christmas bonuses that Mr. Sullivan had bestowed upon me annually, funds that I had deliberately omitted from my tax declarations, believing them to be personal gratuities. I also disclosed the occasions when grateful clients, in their appreciation for exceptional service, had presented me with cash gratuities. These too I had failed to report, as I was unaware of any obligation to do so. Collectively, approximately how much monetary value are we contemplating over the course of those 40 years? She inquired. Perhaps $1,000, I confessed, a profound sense of shame coloring my response. Brenda swiftly performed a calculation, factoring in accrued interest and penalties. We are likely looking at a tax liability in the vicinity of $40,000. However, the most alarming aspect was that it constituted a clear case of tax evasion. My son had artfully constructed an inescapable predicament. If I pursued charges against him, he would undoubtedly retaliate by exposing my own transgressions. If I refrained from taking action, he would remain at liberty to continue his pattern of abuse and financial exploitation. There exists a third viable option, Brenda stated after a prolonged period of contemplation, an option that neither of us would likely anticipate. We will proactively confront him. We will voluntarily confess all your past indiscretions before he has the opportunity to weaponize them for blackmail. And we will leverage this confession to unequivocally demonstrate that your son is a master manipulator, adept at exerting psychological control over his victims, even from behind bars. It was a gamble of considerable risk. It entailed publicly admitting to having committed offenses, facing potential legal repercussions, and exposing myself to public opprobrium. However, it also offered the distinct advantage of neutralizing Ethan's most potent weapon, my concealed transgressions. Should we proceed with this course of action, Brenda continued, your son will forfeit all leverage he holds over you. He will be rendered incapable of blackmailing you, as there will be nothing left for him to expose. I gazed out the window at my home, which remained conspicuously vacant and visibly damaged across the street. That structure symbolized my past, my errors, my pervasive anxieties, but it also represented my future, my liberation, and my opportunity for a fresh beginning. "Let us proceed," I finally declared. "I am utterly exhausted from living in a perpetual state of fear. I am weary of my son dictating the terms of my existence from within the confines of a jail cell." Brenda's face illuminated with a confident smile. "Tomorrow we shall present Ethan with a most unexpected revelation." The day designated for our strategic counteroffensive arrived with remarkable swiftness. Brenda had meticulously organized a press conference scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon, during which I would voluntarily disclose all my past indiscretions, thereby preempting Ethan's attempt to exploit them. It was an audacious strategy, yet it represented our sole opportunity to reclaim dominion over the unfolding situation. That morning, I awoke with a clarity of mind that had been conspicuously absent for years. For the inaugural instant since Ethan's arrest, I experienced an absence of fear. I had committed to a decision that would indelibly reshape the trajectory of my life. And, remarkably, a profound sense of peace settled upon me. Clarice assisted me in preparing for the day's events. I donned my most somber charcoal grey dress, the one I typically reserved for formal occasions during my employment at the firm. I applied a subtle touch of makeup, just enough to project an appearance of composure without masking the reality of my present state. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Monica?" Clarice inquired for the 5th time that morning. "Once those words are spoken publicly, there is no possibility of retraction." "I am unequivocally certain," I responded, surprised by the resolute tone of my own voice. For 3 years I endured a life of captivity within my own home, paralyzed by the apprehension of future repercussions. I refused to remain imprisoned by the consequences of my past mistakes. At midday, Brenda contacted me with some unexpected developments. "Monica, an extraordinary occurrence has just transpired. Raphael Miller, Ethan's supervisor at the corporation, wishes to speak with you prior to the press conference." Raphael was the individual who uncovered Ethan's embezzlements, the very same man who turned pale when the truth came to light. I couldn't fathom his motive for wanting to converse with me. We convened in Brenda's office. Raphael was a man in his 50s, distinguished by his graying hair and an aura that exuded authority. Upon my entrance, he immediately stood from his chair. "Mrs. Davis," he addressed me, his tone warm yet earnest. "Firstly, I extend my profound apologies. Had I provided Ethan with more diligent oversight, had I heeded the warning signs, perhaps we could have spared you considerable hardship." His pronouncements were startling. "You had no conceivable way of foreseeing the events unfolding within my household." "Perhaps not," Raphael conceded, settling into the chair opposite me. "However, I was certainly aware that irregularities were transpiring within the company's financial operations. Your son's misappropriations did not commence 6 months ago. They began 2 years prior." My heart lurched. 2 years? 2 years, Raphael affirmed. Initially, the sums were minuscule, so insignificant that we dismissed them as mere accounting discrepancies. But when we initiated our inquiry following your formal complaint, we discovered he had been systematically pilfering funds for an extensive period. Brenda leaned forward. "Could you quantify the total sum involved?" $130,000. Raphael stated, clarifying that these funds were channeled directly into accounts under his control, including your personal bank account. A wave of nausea washed over me. Not only had I endured physical and psychological torment, but I had been an unwitting instrument in a substantial fraud for 2 full years. "There is, however, more," Raphael continued. Upon Ethan's apprehension, our legal department conducted a more thorough investigation. We unearthed evidence of his fabrication of reports, his manipulation of contractual agreements, and even his clandestine sale of the company's proprietary information to rival entities. "Why are you divulging this information to me?" I inquired. Raphael offered a smile, the first genuine one since our exchange began. "Because we wish to extend a job offer to you, Mrs. Davis, a position. During our investigation, we reviewed your professional history. 40 years dedicated to Sullivan and Associates, impeccable references, and extensive experience managing complex matters. We require an individual with your caliber of experience to assist us in rectifying the damage your son has inflicted." The words were almost unbelievable. Instead of facing legal repercussions and public disgrace, I was being presented with an opportunity. "The remuneration would be $4,000 per month," Raphael elaborated. "In addition, comprehensive health benefits will be provided, along with a special recompense of $50,000 as acknowledgement for the unintended distress we have caused you." $4,000 monthly represented more than thrice my current pension, and $50,000 as compensation was substantial. Abruptly, my outlook for the future brightened considerably. "There is, however, one stipulation," Raphael added. "We require your cooperation in testifying at your son's trial. Your testimony will be paramount in ensuring he is held accountable for all his transgressions, not solely those perpetrated against you." "Certainly," I responded without hesitation. "I will do whatever is necessary." At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the press room was a hive of activity, teeming with journalists, an array of cameras, and numerous microphones. Brenda had extended invitations to all local media outlets, ostensibly to announce that a victim of domestic abuse would be delivering a significant statement concerning blackmail originating from incarceration. As I took my place before the cameras, a distinct apprehension, different from the dread I had harbored for years, permeated me. It was not a fear of Ethan. It was not a fear of the physical assaults or the insidious threats. It was the fear of liberation, the fear of assuming ownership of my own existence. "My name is Monica Davis," I declared, my gaze fixed directly upon the lenses. "I am 61 years of age, and for the past 3 years I have been subjected to domestic abuse by my son, Ethan Davis." I recounted my entire ordeal, the physical violence, the financial subjugation, the menacing threats, the systematic depletion of my savings. Crucially, I also revealed the aspect that Ethan had fervently hoped I would keep concealed. "During my 40 years of employment as a secretary at the law firm of Sullivan and Associates, I made errors," I stated, my voice gaining strength with each utterance. "Mistakes that, at the time, I did not comprehend were unlawful, but which I now recognize as such." I detailed the specifics of the Williams case, the falsified documentation, the undeclared funds, every incriminating detail. I held nothing back. My son became aware of these oversights, and he has been leveraging them to extort me from his prison cell. He threatened to expose me publicly if I did not withdraw the charges against him. Today I stand before you to disarm him of that weapon. I would rather confront the repercussions of my own missteps than continue to be a pawn in his manipulative game. A profound silence descended upon the room. The journalists scribbled furiously, their pens flying across their notepads. The cameras meticulously captured every word. "I wish to convey a message to all women who are experiencing abuse at the hands of their sons, husbands, or partners," I continued. "Emotional coercion, financial control, threats of exposure, these are all manifestations of abuse. Do not permit the dread of public scrutiny to render you a captive. Freedom possesses a value far exceeding that of one's reputation. Following the press conference, Brenda informed me that the district attorney's office had elected not to pursue charges against me for my past indiscretions. Your voluntary confession, coupled with the circumstances of your victimization by blackmail, renders you a more valuable witness than a defendant. She explained. That evening, for the first time in many months, I returned to sleep in my own residence. Clarice insisted on staying with me for the initial nights until I felt entirely secure. As I settled into my familiar bed within my own home, I experienced a sensation I had not felt in 3 years: complete autonomy over my own life. Ethan remained incarcerated, facing numerous indictments that would likely result in a lengthy sentence. His blackmail had lost all its potency, as I no longer harbored any secrets to conceal. My telephone rang. It was an incoming call from the detention facility, but this time I answered without trepidation. "Mom," Ethan's voice, stripped of its former arrogance, emanated from the receiver, sounding utterly defeated. "I saw your press conference on the news." "And what are your thoughts on it?" I inquired, a newfound calmness surprising even myself. "You've ruined everything," he lamented, not with anger, but with a profound sense of sorrow. "You've destroyed my last opportunity to get out of here." "No, Ethan," I countered. "You forfeited that opportunity when you chose to make your mother your victim." A lengthy silence ensued on his end of the line. "Will you ever forgive me?" he finally asked. "Someday," I replied with complete honesty. "When you atone for your actions, when you seek genuine assistance for self-improvement, when you comprehend the magnitude of the harm you have inflicted, perhaps someday I will be able to forgive you, but I will never forget." I ended the call and deactivated my phone. Tomorrow I would commence my new role, my new existence, but tonight my sole desire was to sleep undisturbed in my own dwelling, free from fear, free from threats, free from coercion. For the first time in 3 years, I was unequivocally liberated, and though the journey had been fraught with pain, though I had been compelled to confront my personal failings in public, and though I had irrevocably fractured the bond with my son, I knew I had made the correct choice. Ethan had learned that victims can find strength, that secrets diminish in power when brought into the light, and that justice, though often delayed, ultimately prevails. And I had learned that it is never too late to reclaim one's life, irrespective of the years spent dwelling in obscurity. This was my narrative of emancipation, a story I hope will empower other women to sever their own shackles, regardless of who fashioned them.